Dr. Zixthala had devoted 3 of her 7 lifetimes to this single problem. The ancient tablets discovered on Kepler 442b had baffled the greatest linguistic minds across 17 star systems. The script was elegant, the grammar structure seemingly sophisticated, and the semantic patterns absolutely, mind-numbingly incomprehensible. Perhaps, she muttered to herself in her native Voltairean clicks and whistles, adjusting her translation collar for the 1000th time that cycle. The ancients were simply drunk when they carved these. The Galactic Linguistic Institute's most prestigious minds had gathered on the research station orbiting the dead world. There was Professor Morin, whose species had evolved perfect memory and could recite conversations from 6 centuries past word for word. Dr. Nessa, whose race communicated through color-shifting skin patterns and had decoded 47 previously unknown languages in the past decade alone. And Commander Thrixwell, who wasn't technically a linguist but had insisted on attending because, quote, military intelligence needs to know if this is some kind of ancient weapon manual. 3 years. 3 entire years they'd been staring at these tablets, running them through every conceivable algorithm, comparing them to every known linguistic structure in the galactic database. The tablet spoke of great deeds, mighty conquests, and what appeared to be either profound philosophical insights or possibly recipes. Nobody could tell which. The syntax is all wrong, Professor Morin announced during their daily briefing, his forearms gesticulating wildly while his translators struggled to keep up. Look at this phrase here. Maximus Bruticus defeatus anemicus totalis. The structure suggests action, but the morphological elements are completely inconsistent with any known linguistic family. Dr. Nessa's skin flickered through various shades of frustrated purple. I've run semantic analysis on every permutation. Either this civilization had the most complex grammatical system ever developed, or they were collectively having a stroke while writing. Commander Thrixwell, who had been suspiciously quiet, cleared his throat. What if it's not a language at all? What if it's some kind of code? We've tried that, Dr. Zixthala said, her tentacles drooping with exhaustion. 17 different cryptographic approaches, nothing. It reads like a language, but follows no linguistic laws we understand. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday, which was particularly ironic since Tuesday didn't exist on the research station's artificial time system. But Dr. Zixthala had kept Earth calendars ever since her brief stint studying human behavioral patterns. Humans, she had noted, were oddly fond of their temporal markers, even in the vast emptiness of space. That Tuesday, their human consultant finally arrived. Dr. Marcus Chen shuffled into the linguistics lab looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. His hair was a mess, his clothes were wrinkled, and he carried with him the unmistakable aura of someone who had been woken up far too early and forced to attend a meeting he didn't want to be at. So, he said, stifling a yawn, I hear you folks have been having trouble with some dead language? Dr. Zixthala felt her respiratory systems flutter with hope. Humans, according to galactic academic circles, had a peculiar talent for pattern recognition. Their brains, evolved from primitive survival needs, could sometimes spot connections that more advanced logical minds missed entirely. Indeed, she said, gesturing toward the holographic displays showing thousands of carefully photographed tablet inscriptions. We've applied every known linguistic analysis technique. The script appears to describe historical events, but the grammar is completely alien to us. Marcus approached the displays, coffee cup in hand, another inexplicably human ritual, and began reading. His expression went from bored to confused to something that looked suspiciously like suppressed amusement. He said, and then started chuckling. The assembled galactic linguists exchanged glances. Professor Kethmoran's translator was making worried beeping sounds. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his chuckling evolving into full laughter. "I don't mean to be rude, but this is hilarious." Hilarious? Dr. Zixathala's tentacles stiffened. "Dr. Chen, this is potentially one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the millennium." "Oh, it's significant, all right." Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. "But not for the reasons you think." He pointed at the first tablet. "Look at this line here. Gaius Stupidicus Marcicus into Batulus. You've been trying to decode this as some kind of sophisticated alien language. But it's just Latin. Really, really bad Latin." The silence in the room was profound. Dr. Yilnessa's skin had gone completely white, which in her species indicated either complete shock or preparation for combat. "That's impossible," Professor Kethmoran said. "We compared it against all Earth languages in the database." "Yeah, but you compared it against correct Latin," Marcus said, grinning. "This isn't correct Latin. This is what happens when someone who half remembers high school Latin tries to sound impressive. Look, defeatus enemicus totalis. Defeated enemies totally. It's like someone took English grammar, threw some Latinish endings on it, and called it a day." He pulled up another tablet. "And this one. Legionis Maximus Victorius Againsticis the Barbarian People's Icus." I mean, come on. The guy literally just stuck icus on the end of English words and hoped nobody would notice. Commander Thrixwell was making choking sounds. "Are you telling us that we've spent 3 years trying to decode fake Latin?" "Not fake," Marcus said, scrolling through more examples. "Just really, really bad. Like, I learned Latin from a phrase book and maybe watched Gladiator a couple of times bad. Look at this beauty. Emperoris Decidicus Tibildicus Bigicus Wallicus for Keepicus out Barbarian Hordicus." That's not ancient wisdom. That's someone trying to sound smart at a toga party. Dr. Zixthala felt something very close to what humans called an existential crisis. But the tablets were found in an archaeological context, dating back 3,000 Earth years. "Right," Marcus nodded. "So, either time-traveling Romans with terrible Latin skills visited this planet, or what?" Dr. Yilnessa's skin was cycling through colors that didn't have names. Marcus pulled up the planetary survey data. "Well, according to this, Kepler 442b was surveyed by Earth expedition ships about, 300 years ago. Back when humanity was going through that weird phase where everyone was super into classical civilization." The pieces began clicking together with the sound of academic reputations crumbling. "You're suggesting," Professor Kethmoran said slowly, "that human colonists created these tablets as some sort of, what, prank?" "Not a prank," Marcus said, warming to the subject. "More like historical LARPing gone wrong. Live-action role-playing," he clarified, seeing their confused expressions. "Humans used to do this thing where they'd dress up like Romans and pretend to have great battles and build empires. Some group probably came here, decided it would be fun to create their own ancient civilization, and made these tablets to commemorate their fake victories." He pointed to another inscription. "See this one? Lidericus Dicius Maximicus Lidicus warriors into glorious Batalicus against Terriblicus Pizza Shortagecus." Pizza people. They're commemorating a pizza shortage in fake Latin. The room fell silent, except for the humming of the station's life support systems and what sounded suspiciously like Dr. Yilnessa whimpering. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years of my life spent analyzing references to pizza shortages. Marcus continued his devastating analysis. And this section here that you thought might be religious texts? O mighty Jupiter Icus, givicus us strength to findicus the bathroom Icus in darkness Icus. They're talking about finding bathrooms, not divine enlightenment. Commander Thrixwell stood up abruptly. I need to report to my superiors that the potential alien weapon technology is actually a record of humans looking for toilets. Wait, it gets better, Marcus said, clearly enjoying himself now. This tablet you labeled as complex philosophical discourse, it's actually a complaint about the weather. Why Icus does rain Icus fall when we want Icus to have picnic Icus? The gods Icus are menicus to us simple peoples Icus. Dr. Zixathala's tentacles had gone completely limp. How could we have missed this? We're supposed to be the galaxy's premier linguists. Because you were looking for sophisticated alien communication, Marcus said, his tone becoming surprisingly gentle. You expected to find profound alien wisdom, not humans being idiots. Your mistake was assuming the language was supposed to make sense. He pulled up a particularly long inscription. Look at this epic tablet here. The one you thought might be their creation myth? Let me translate. In the beginning, Icus, there was nothing Icus. Then Bob Icus the Great said, let there be beer Icus. And there was beer Icus, and it was good Icus. But then Steve Icus drank all the beer Icus, and Bob Icus was angry Icus. So Bob Icus declared war Icus on Steve Icus, and thus began the Great Beer War Icus of the third weekend Icus. Professor Keth Morin made a sound like a deflating balloon. The Great Beer War of the third weekend. Gets better, Marcus continued. Apparently Steve Icus won by hiding all the beer Icus in his tent Icus, so Bob Icus had to surrender Icus and promised to bring more beer Icus next time Icus. The moral of the story is clearly stated. Always bring backup beer Icus when camping Icus with Steve Icus. Dr. Yilnessa had cycled through so many colors, she was starting to look like a rainbow having an identity crisis. Camping advice. We thought it was a creation myth, and it was camping advice. The best part, Marcus said, warming to his subject, is that they tried to make it sound official. Look at this legal-sounding section. Let it be known, Icus throughout the land, Icus, that whoever Icus steals the last slice Icus of pizza Icus shall be banished Icus from the tent Icus until they bring Icus more pizza Icus from the replicator Icus. Replicator, Commander Thrixwell repeated flatly. They mentioned a replicator in their ancient texts. Standard equipment on those early colony ships. Marcus nodded. These weren't primitive ancients. They were probably a bunch of history professors and weekend warriors who decided to role-play Roman civilization on an uninhabited planet. The tablets are their equivalent of a club newsletter. Dr. Zixthala finally found her voice. How do you explain the sophisticated carving techniques? The tablets show advanced stonework. Marcus shrugged. Laser carving tools. Standard colonial equipment. They probably used industrial fabrication units to make these things. The real mystery isn't how they carved them. It's how they managed to make so many without dying of embarrassment. He highlighted another section. This one's my favorite, though. Apparently there was some kind of schism in their little Roman role-play group. Marcus Anoicus did declare that Gladius Swords Icus were better than Spears Icus. But Jennifer Smarticus proved that Spears Icus had better reach Icus, and thus began the great weapon debate Icus that lasted Icus for 3 entire days, Icus until pizza arrived Icus, and everyone forgot Icus what they were arguing about Icus. a philosophical debate about weapons that was resolved by pizza delivery. Professor Keth Morin said in the tone of someone whose worldview was crumbling in real time. Colonial food delivery service, Marcus confirmed. The timestamps in the planet's communication logs probably match up perfectly with the divine intervention icus of the pizza god's icus. Dr. Yilnessa's skin had settled on a pale blue that Marcus was fairly certain indicated acceptance of horrible truth. What about this section we thought described their agricultural practices? Marcus examined the indicated text. The great harvest icus of the beer plant's icus was successful icus, yielding many cans icus of the blessed beverage icus. But then the supply ship icus was delayed icus, and great sadness icus fell upon the people icus. That's not agriculture. That's a chronicle of their beer supply running out while waiting for the next supply shipment. Beer plants, Dr. Zixthala repeated. We spent 6 months analyzing their supposed agricultural innovations, and they were talking about running out of beer. Marcus nodded sympathetically. The tragic thing is, they probably thought they were being really clever. Hey guys, let's make fake historical tablets in pseudo-Latin to commemorate our awesome Roman camping trip. And then they abandoned the planet when the colonial program got defunded or something, leaving behind what they probably thought was a hilarious joke for future archaeologists. Commander Thrixwell was furiously making notes. I need to update our threat assessment database. Potential classification, harmless human shenanigans. Wait, Dr. Zixthala said, a horrible thought occurring to her. If this is just bad Latin, does that mean the other mysterious languages we've discovered might also be? Marcus looked uncomfortable. Well, I'd need to see them. But humans did go through a lot of phases. There was the ancient Egypt period, the Viking obsession, the whole Celtic warrior thing. Professor Keth Morin's translator started making alarmed beeping sounds as he began accessing files. Dr. Chen, could you look at these inscriptions we found on Trappist-1Ni? We've been calling it the mystic runic language of the northern star gods. Marcus glanced at the display and immediately started laughing again. Oh, that's not mystic runic language. That's just Swedish. Really, really bad Swedish. With some Norwegian thrown in randomly, probably because whoever was carving it couldn't remember which Nordic country they were supposed to be from. The silence that followed was the sound of academic careers being reconsidered. This inscription that we thought was a prayer to their war gods? Professor Keth Morin asked weakly. Recipe for meatballs, Marcus said cheerfully. And this one about crossing the great water under the guidance of the star ravens is actually someone complaining about their GPS not working while they tried to find a good fishing spot. Dr. Yilnessa's skin had given up on colors entirely and was now just flashing random patterns. How many human colonial expeditions were there? Marcus pulled up historical records. Oh, thousands. Humanity went through this whole phase where every cultural group wanted their own planet to recreate their idealized version of historical civilization. There were Roman planets, Viking worlds, medieval kingdoms, Wild West settlements, ancient Egyptian colonies. He paused. Actually, that explains a lot about some of the other mysterious archaeological sites we've found. Dr. Zixthala felt her career dissolving before her eyes. Are you telling me that most of the great linguistic mysteries of the past century are just humans playing dress-up on colonial planets? Not all of them, Marcus said reassuringly. But probably a lot more than you'd like. Humans have this weird thing about wanting to live in their favorite historical periods, except with indoor plumbing and pizza delivery. Commander Thrixwell looked up from his notes. Dr. Chen, these tablets we found on Ross 128b that seem to describe ancient Egyptian-style burial rituals. Let me guess. They're in hieroglyphics. But the grammar is all wrong and there are references to modern technology. The pharaoh supposedly commanded his servants to charge his sacred communication device before burial. Marcus nodded. Yep, that'll be humans again. Probably some group that decided they were going to live like ancient Egyptians, but kept their cell phones. The sacred communication device thing is actually pretty creative. They were at least trying to maintain the illusion. Dr. Zixathala made a sound that her species used to indicate the universe was fundamentally broken. 30 years of my career. 30 years studying what I thought were profound insights into alien civilizations, and it's all just humans being humans. Look on the bright side, Marcus said. At least now you understand why human archaeological sites are so weird. We have this talent for taking any historical period and somehow making it about food, relationships, and complaining about the weather. Professor Keth Moran was frantically scrolling through databases. Dr. Chen, what about the Tau Ceti texts? The ones written in what appears to be ancient Greek, but with impossible mathematical concepts integrated into the language structure. Marcus squinted at the display. That's not ancient Greek with mathematics. That's modern Greek with bad math. See this section about calculating the trajectory of flying food icus? They're trying to figure out the optimal angle for throwing pita bread across their campsite. The mathematical formulas are completely wrong, by the way. Whoever wrote this failed basic physics. Pita bread trajectories, Dr. Yilnessa whispered. We submitted a paper to the Galactic Journal of Advanced Mathematics about pita bread trajectories. It happens to the best of us, Marcus said kindly. The real question is, how did these tablets end up being classified as ancient alien artifacts instead of obvious human colonial debris? Dr. Zixathala consulted her records. Most of these planets were surveyed after the colonial period ended. The expeditions found what appeared to be ruins of unknown civilizations and submitted them to the archaeological database without checking human colonial records. Marcus nodded. Makes sense. Humans are terrible at keeping track of their own history. Half these colonial expeditions probably weren't properly documented, and the other half had their records lost in bureaucratic reshuffles. So when you find tablets talking about Emperor Bobicus the Great and his mighty battles against the terrible pizza shortage of the second Tuesday, you don't think failed human colony. You think fascinating alien civilization. Commander Thrixwell was looking increasingly disturbed. Dr. Chen, our xenoarchaeology division has been treating these discoveries as potential evidence of pre-contact civilizations. We've been developing first contact protocols based on the assumption that these were examples of alien cultural development. Oh, that's unfortunate, Marcus said. Your first contact protocols are probably based on humans arguing about whether to have pizza or tacos for dinner, disguised as profound philosophical debates about the nature of existence. The room fell silent, except for what sounded like Dr. Yilnessa quietly having a breakdown. The worst part, she finally said, is that it all makes sense now. We kept wondering why these alien civilizations seemed so familiar, why their concerns seemed so relatable. They worried about food, complained about weather, had petty arguments with their friends. Because they were humans, Marcus said gently. Just humans playing pretend on empty planets, having the same stupid arguments humans have always had, except they tried to make it sound epic by putting icus on the end of everything. Professor Morin was reviewing his life's work with the expression of someone who had just discovered his masterpiece was painted with crayons. The linguistic patterns we identified as evidence of advanced cognitive development. Probably just drunk people trying to remember Latin class from 20 years ago, Marcus confirmed. Although I have to admit, some of their creative word formations are pretty entertaining. Weponus pointicus for stabicus enemies baticus shows a certain direct approach to language. Dr. Zix Thala's tentacles drooped further. We presented that particular phrase as evidence of sophisticated military terminology to the Galactic Defense Council. Well, Marcus said cheerfully, at least you know humans are direct communicators. Stabby thing for stabbing bad guys is about as clear as military doctrine gets. Commander Thrixwell looked up from his notes. On the positive side, this does explain why all these ancient alien civilizations seem to have such detailed knowledge of human military tactics and social structures. Because they were humans with detailed knowledge of human military tactics and social structures. Marcus agreed. Mystery solved, although I do have to ask. Didn't anyone think it was weird that all these different alien civilizations were obsessed with pizza? The assembled galactic linguists exchanged looks that could have powered a small fusion reactor with pure embarrassment. We theorized that pizza represented a universal culinary archetype, Dr. Zixathala admitted. The perfect fusion of grain, dairy, and vegetable matter appealing to nutritional needs across species. Marcus stared at her. You created a unified theory of galactic cuisine based on humans complaining about pizza delivery. It seemed logical at the time. And the beer references? Universal fermentation practices indicating advanced biochemical knowledge. Marcus shook his head slowly. You folks really committed to this, didn't you? What about the constant mentions of Steve? Professor Moran consulted his notes. We identified Steve as either a recurring mythological figure or possibly a title indicating leadership or divine authority. The Stevicus principle became a cornerstone of our understanding of their social hierarchy. Steve was probably just some guy who kept eating everyone's food and hogging the good camping spots, Marcus said. Every group has a Steve. He's the guy who shows up late, forgets to bring his share of supplies, and somehow always ends up with the best tent location. We wrote 3 papers on the sociological implications of the Steve archetype, Dr. Yilnessa said faintly. Well, you weren't wrong about the sociological implications, Marcus said. Steve types are definitely a consistent feature of human group dynamics. You just missed the fact that he was a specific annoying guy, not a religious figure. Commander Thrixwell was making rapid calculations. Dr. Chen, if these colonies were established during Earth's classical revival period, approximately how many other similar sites might exist? Marcus consulted the historical database. Conservative estimate? Probably a few thousand planets. Humans went through phases: Roman period, Viking period, medieval period, Renaissance period, Wild West period. He paused. Oh, and there was this whole thing where everyone wanted to recreate ancient Greece, but with better plumbing. The color drained from every translator device in the room. A few thousand, Dr. Zixathala repeated. A few thousand planets where humans pretended to be historical civilizations and left behind fake artifacts. Fake is a strong word, Marcus said. More like enthusiastic historical reenactment taken to its logical extreme. They weren't trying to deceive future archaeologists. They just wanted to live like Romans or Vikings or whatever. And they documented their experiences in the style of their chosen period. Professor Keth Morin was frantically accessing galactic archaeological databases. Dr. Chen, could you examine these inscriptions from Proxima Centauri b? We've classified them as the mysterious warrior poet civilization. Marcus looked at the display and immediately grinned. That's not warrior poetry. That's cowboy talk. Badly written cowboy talk. This here town ain't big enough for the both of us IQs. Partner IQs is not ancient wisdom. It's someone who watched too many Western movies trying to sound authentic. Cowboy talk, Dr. Yilnessa repeated in the tone of someone whose understanding of the universe had been fundamentally violated. Yep. Looks like you found a Wild West colony. They probably spent their time having pretend gunfights and complaining about the lack of saloons on frontier planets. This inscription about riding the metal horse Icus into the sunset Icus is talking about hoverbikes, not mystical steeds. Dr. Zixthala was reviewing her publications list with mounting horror. My paper on advanced metallurgy in pre-contact civilizations was based on their references to metal horses. To be fair, hoverbikes are pretty advanced metallurgy, Marcus said kindly. You weren't technically wrong, just slightly off on the context. Colonial-era hoverbikes were actually quite sophisticated pieces of engineering. Commander Thrixwell looked up from his increasingly frantic note-taking. Dr. Chen, how do we distinguish between actual alien artifacts and human colonial role-play remnants? Marcus thought for a moment. Well, if it mentions pizza, beer, complaining about Steve, or any references to Earth technology disguised with classical terminology, it's probably humans. Real alien civilizations probably wouldn't develop independent cultural obsessions with Italian food and fermented grain beverages. What about legitimate alien languages? Professor Keth Morin asked desperately. Please tell me some of our discoveries are actually alien. Marcus reviewed the database of galactic linguistic discoveries. Oh, sure, plenty. The crystalline matrix languages from the Vega system are definitely alien. No human would develop a communication system based on harmonic resonance frequencies. And the temporal loop scripts from the Altair colonies are way too complex for human brains to even conceive, let alone execute. Dr. Zixthala perked up slightly. So, we haven't wasted our entire careers? Not at all, Marcus assured her. You've made genuine discoveries. It's just that maybe 60% of your mysterious ancient alien languages are actually humans being weird on colonial planets. The other 40% are legitimate alien communication systems that really do represent fascinating insights into non-human cognition. 60%, Dr. Yilnessa said in a small voice. Could be worse, Marcus said cheerfully. At least you know the difference now. Going forward, if you find inscriptions complaining about weather, food shortages, or interpersonal drama, just check the human colonial database first. It'll save you years of analytical work. Professor Keth Morin was already implementing new protocols. We'll establish a screening system. Any archaeological discovery that mentions beverages, food delivery, or individuals named Steve, Bob, Jennifer, or Marcus will be cross-referenced with human settlement records before linguistic analysis begins. Smart approach, Marcus agreed. Although you might want to expand that list. Humans use a lot of names, and colonial expeditions tended to be pretty diverse. Also, watch out for any references to the sacred ritual of pizza ordering, or divine intervention of the supply ship. Dr. Zixthala was beginning to see the humor in the situation. At least our methodology was sound. We just applied it to the wrong data set. Exactly, Marcus said. Your linguistic analysis techniques are excellent. You just didn't account for the possibility that the language you were analyzing was supposed to be stupid. Once you factor in human tendency toward historical cosplay and general silliness, everything makes perfect sense. Commander Thrixwell finished his report and looked up. Dr. Chen, one final question. Should we be concerned about any of these colonial remnants from a security perspective? Marcus considered this. Not unless you're worried about the strategic implications of the Great Beer War of the third weekend. Most human colonial role-play groups were more concerned with authentic period costume and accurate historical recreation than actual conquest. Their mighty battles were probably elaborate games with foam weapons. Foam weapons, the commander repeated. Standard safety equipment for historical reenactment, Marcus explained. Humans figured out pretty early that actual sword fights result in actual injuries, so they developed safe alternatives for recreational combat. The legendary battles described in these tablets probably involved a lot of enthusiastic shouting and very little actual violence. Dr. Yilnessa's skin had finally settled on a stable color, a sort of resigned pink. So the detailed battle tactics we analyzed were actually recreational game strategies? Probably, Marcus agreed, although some of them might be legitimate historical recreation. Humans did extensive research into actual historical military tactics for their role-play activities. So you might have been analyzing accurate Roman military doctrine just applied to weekend camping trips instead of actual warfare. Dr. Zixathala tentatively raised a tentacle. Dr. Chen, what should we do with our existing publications? We've built entire theoretical frameworks based on these discoveries. Marcus shrugged. Republish them as studies of human colonial culture and historical recreation practices. Your analysis is still valuable. You just need to change the context. Instead of alien linguistic structures and their implications for non-human cognition, you could publish Human Historical Recreation and its reflection in colonial pseudo-classical literature. Professor Kethmorin brightened considerably. That actually sounds like a legitimate field of study. Oh, it definitely is, Marcus confirmed. Human cultural recreation practices are fascinating from an anthropological perspective. The way colonists adapted historical models to frontier conditions, the linguistic creativity involved in pseudo-classical language creation, the social dynamics of extended historical role-play. There's enough material there for decades of research. The mood in the room was beginning to shift from despair to something approaching optimism. Plus, Marcus added, now you have a perfect screening system for future discoveries. Anytime you find mysterious inscriptions that seem weirdly familiar or relatable, just run them past a human consultant first. We're pretty good at recognizing our own nonsense. Dr. Zixathala was already making plans. We could establish a new department, Human Colonial Cultural Studies. Focus on the linguistic and anthropological aspects of historical recreation in frontier settlements. Now you're thinking, Marcus said approvingly. And who knows? You might discover some genuinely interesting things about human cultural adaptation and identity formation in colonial environments. Just because it's not alien doesn't mean it's not academically valuable. Commander Thrixwell gathered his notes. I need to report back to command. The good news is, we can declassify most of these sites from potential security threats to cultural heritage locations. The bad news is, I have to explain why our threat assessment protocols were based on analysis of human camping trips. Look at it this way, Marcus suggested. At least you know humans aren't secretly developing advanced alien technologies. We're just really enthusiastic about historical cosplay and really bad at record keeping." As the meeting broke up, Dr. Zixthala found herself oddly grateful for the revelation. 3 years of frustration had been resolved in a single afternoon, and while her original theories had been completely wrong, she now had a clear path forward. Plus, she had to admit, the idea of humans scattered across the galaxy staging elaborate historical reenactments and leaving behind hilariously inaccurate pseudo-classical inscriptions was somehow endearing. It spoke to a species that took their entertainment seriously, even in the harsh environment of frontier colonization. As Marcus prepared to leave, she stopped him with one final question. "Dr. Chen, one thing still puzzles me. If these were just recreational activities, why did the humans put so much effort into creating elaborate stone tablets? Why not just keep digital records?" Marcus grinned. "Because that wouldn't have been historically accurate. If you're going to role-play as ancient Romans, you have to do it right. Stone tablets, ceremonial inscriptions, the whole experience. The fact that they were living on a planet with industrial fabrication technology didn't matter. They wanted authentic stone tablets, so they made authentic stone tablets, even if the Latin was terrible." Dr. Zixthala's tentacles wiggled in what passed for laughter among her species. "So they used advanced technology to create primitive artifacts containing badly constructed classical languages." "Now you're getting it," Marcus said. "Humans will go to enormous effort to have authentic experiences, even when authenticity requires ignoring the technology that makes the experience possible. We're weird that way." As he left, Dr. Zixthala reflected on the day's revelations. The greatest linguistic mystery of the millennium had been solved not through advanced analytical techniques or sophisticated theoretical frameworks, but by a sleepy human who recognized his own species' particular brand of enthusiastic historical nonsense. It was, she realized, a very human way to solve a very human problem. And somewhere in the galactic database, thousands of other mysterious inscriptions waited to be decoded by someone who understood that sometimes the most profound archaeological discoveries were just people having fun and being slightly ridiculous about it. The universe, Dr. Zixthala decided, was a much more amusing place than she'd previously realized, even if it did mean her life's work had been based on analyzing complaints about pizza delivery and the social dynamics of camping trips. At least now she knew why the ancient wisdom had seemed so relatable.